Why do some women deeply involved in goddess spirituality, sometimes for years, suddenly abandon their beliefs in favor of a form of one of the male-dominated mainstream Abrahamic religions like Christianity or Islam? Over the years, we have had several seemingly staunch goddess women members, not newbies, suddenly renounce everything and either return to or join a fundamentalist religion like Christianity or Islam. The famous New Age teacher Doreen Virtue did this. Some years back, Doreen came to our goddess temple in Irvine to have a teaching event, and she was a good teacher. And now, mind you, she was fully into the show. She showed up in these white Grecian robes with something like 8 or 10 acolyte priestesses walking in procession behind her. They all had these white flowing robes. They all had a gold circlet over long flowing blonde hair. It was impressive. And I have to say, I was somewhat taken aback because it seemed very, well, like some kind of high-end Las Vegas production goddess stage show. But she was a good teacher and she had some things to say. And at that time, she was well known, not so much for specifically goddess spirituality, but more for New Age spirituality, which is completely different, particularly focused on the angelic realms. But she did at one point create the goddess oracle cards, and I must say they were good. They worked. They still work. They're a beautiful deck. They're well done. And I still use that deck often in ritual and ceremony. But it turns out, after years of being a very successful New Age teacher, suddenly she did a turnabout. She renounced everything that she had done, all her work, all of it. And this is what you will find if you try to buy something of hers before 2017, her New Age work. This is what you will see as the disclaimer. Since giving her life to Jesus as her Lord and Savior in 2017, Doreen Virtue has renounced all her old work. She asks that people stop buying her goddess oracle cards and New Age books as they are spiritually unsafe. There are illegal copies of her old work for sale on Amazon. All her New Age work is worthless. Doreen now only writes scripturally, and by that they mean the Judeo-Christian biblical scripture. And Doreen studies the Bible daily, and she is working hard to evangelize to New Agers, end quote. If you look up the definition of evangelist, if it is capitalized, it literally means patriarch. By the definition of her own chosen church, Doreen cannot be an evangelist since she is female. So why do women like Doreen do this amazing turnabout? Think about the amount of research, the hours of study, the commitment it takes to create a really good oracle deck, a deck with accurate history and lore of many, many, many goddesses. She was at one time that committed to the concept of goddess. So how do you turn on your heel and walk away from those beliefs you held for decades to now virtually the opposite position? In interviews, Doreen says that she heard a sermon by Christian pastor Alistair Begg, B-E-G-G, about false prophets, and she felt in that moment that the description fit her. She started attending a Christian evangelical church regularly and began to study the Bible, particularly Deuteronomy, which condemns divination, mediumship, and interpreting omens. In 2017, she had what she says is a life-changing vision of Jesus. A life-changing vision of Jesus. And she became convinced that she had to follow him, even if it meant losing her entire career and reputation. And she now describes things like tarot and her own oracle cards as demonic. And she urges people to destroy her old decks and books. A side note about Alistair Begg, he has written several religious books, one of them titled, this is true, Made for His Pleasure. And if that's not a patriarchal, male-centric title, the premise of Made for His Pleasure is that human beings are created for one purpose, to please God. Remember, a male God. And true fulfillment comes only when a person organizes every area of life around that one purpose, his pleasure. Begg says that the Christian life is not an emotional experience. It is not a mystical encounter, but it is simply about daily obedience, discipline, and alignment with God's revealed will. As men of the church, very human men, mind you, reveal it. So just obey the men, sister. Don't question or think for yourself, just obey. And remember, sisters, suffering is just one of the means that God employs to make us more useful to him, the master. Obedience, discipline, alignment with God's revealed will as men of the church reveal it. So that's Doreen's story. Each woman who changes her mind about women's and goddess spirituality have their own story, their own reasons. But most of the Goddess Temple women I have asked about this, if I had a chance to ask them, and sometimes I didn't, they have never really had a cogent answer. They always respond with very vague things like, well, goddess is just not for me anymore, or, well, I'm not sure that I believe that any longer. Okay, so you no longer believe the divine is immanent, present within the body, within nature, within the material world. You no longer believe in the honoring of Mother Earth, in how we can learn from her cycles of seasons. You no longer believe in the truth of women's bodies. You no longer believe that women's experience is a primary source of spiritual authority. You no longer believe that all life is interwoven and sacred. Really? By coming to our church for so long, it appeared that you believed in the divine in this women's spirituality way. You believed in the ancient, natural, spiritual authority of woman. But now, suddenly, for reasons you can't clarify or explain, suddenly you're going back to a religion that all evidence confirms was created by men, an institution that says in 1,000 ways that men should be in charge and that women are second class. Huh? These women can't tell me why they turn to a male-dominated religion, because for most of them, their deep reasons are likely not clear even to themselves. They don't know themselves. They haven't gone deep enough. I believe for most of them, maybe not all, but most, they are running back to what seems, given their conditioning and upbringing, like a much safer social environment. Sisters, it really all comes down to this. It's really hard to think for yourself. It's really hard to go against your family traditions and teachings. It's really hard to be part of a non-mainstream spiritual system. It's really hard to maintain the sense of self and self-esteem required to continue believing in a worldview that almost no one else agrees with. Humans are social animals, the most social animal, and goddess spirituality is definitely not mainstream. Sisters, as a religion, as a form of spirituality, it's not even on the damn map. 29% of the world says it is Christian, a male-created religion with a male god. 26% of the world identifies as Muslim, a male-created religion with a male god. 15% claim Hinduism. The first Vedic texts were written almost entirely by Brahmins, who were men. The early Vedic community was entirely patriarchal. And while some sects of Hinduism do celebrate goddess like Shaktism, Hindu culture today is still completely dominated by male control. 4% of the world claims to be Buddhist, which technically is not considered a religion, but more a philosophy, because classical Buddhism does not teach about a supreme creator deity. And that's how most people define religion. But obviously, Tibetan Buddhism, for example, honors hundreds of deities, many female, so that's kind of a gray area. The point. Buddhism, as any practitioner can see for herself, and I studied Buddhism intensely for 20 years, is completely dominated by males at every level. But goddess or women's spirituality, it's not even on the world map of religions. If you look up numbers for how many identify as Wiccan or pagan, you will most often get the figure of 0.08%, less than 1%. Goddess spirituality is different from Wicca and general paganism, both of which are built on the polarity model of an equal god and goddess, lord and lady. So Wicca and paganism are both different from goddess spirituality. The point is, the number of goddess women in the world is so low that research says the number cannot be listed. One estimate tried and said it is less than 300,000 in the world. Based on my experience running a goddess temple for 25 years, I wonder if it is even that high. Do you know what percentage that is of the world? 0.0038%. 0.0038%. Consider the level of psychic power it requires to devote oneself to a belief system that only 0.0038% of other human beings now alive believe in. Goddess women are either the biggest category of religious nut jobs the world has ever seen, or we are the leading edge of humanity, holding the ancient red thread of wisdom for civilization. As Margaret Mead said famously, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Consider, it takes the most amazing, sustained psychic energy, the most amazing sense of self, the strongest confidence in one's own internal essence to continue for years in goddess spirituality. The goddess path will probably, painfully, isolate you from your family, your community, your culture. Renouncing it and returning to your roots could certainly feel like the relief of social reconciliation. Returning to Christianity or Islam can restore for a woman that feeling of belonging, validating your worth in the loving arms of community. Welcome home, prodigal sister. Now, it's true that many women, particularly young women, come to goddess or women's spirituality as a form of early rebellion. I'm a witch. They arrive at Thanksgiving family dinners with a big silver pentacle necklace, a serpent ring, a black Ren Fair dress, and way too much kohl eyeliner. Their vehicle bumper sticker says, you know what it says, my other car is a broom. To say you're a witch feels forbidden in this culture. There's a lot of heavy baggage that the Christian church has put on the word witch. And because these women are wanting to rebel against the traditions of their family or culture, this can be attractive for a while. I'm not saying every woman claiming to be a witch is rebelling, just some of them, especially younger women. The ones who adopt this form of spirituality as their way of rebelling against the norms of their family, their society, do often end up eventually relinquishing it. Now, why is that? Because it is exhausting to rebel year after year. That cannot be your long-term reason for being a goddess woman. There are very few 70-year-old rebels. I know a few, but not many. You could call it existential fatigue, the constant requirement to self-define against all the dominant cultural narratives, male, monotheism, patriarchy, rationalism, your church liturgy, your whole neighborhood, even atheism. Self-proclaimed atheists are 7% of the world. Even atheists are much larger in number than goddess women. If you became an atheist, you would have a far larger social group from which to get your validation and support than if you joined a goddess circle. They even have their own magazine and big international conventions. There's a lot of money in atheism. It can be so tiring to constantly go against the mainstream. The human psyche wants acceptance, wants approval, wants confirmation. As a Paleolithic cave woman, you knew that if you were not accepted by your tribe, if you were shunned, you would be tossed out into the snow to freeze, to starve, most likely to die. We are not all Ayla. Was that her name? Clan of the Cave Bear, Ayla? Yeah. For millennia, it has been built into our DNA to want to be socially accepted. Social acceptance is a core drive for the average person, woman or man. But even more so for women, because in a patriarchy, the system we all live under worldwide, women and girls are much more vulnerable to the harm that men dish out than even low status men are. So women feel the need to go along, to get along even more intensely than men, just to survive it all. And if you are a goddess woman, the world will not be giving you that support or validation. That's why women's circles are so important. We meet in physical circle and by Zoom when we have to, for that validation of what we know in our hearts to be true, our true beliefs. For women who return to Christianity or Islam or whatever, some of them do so because there's no ambiguity. There's no self-questioning. There's no room for doubt. The massive religious structure tells you what to believe. And after years of having to think for yourself, after years of going up against maybe your family, your spouse, your friends, your employer, maybe even your entire community, maybe you're exhausted. Many of you have heard me tell the story about how when I wanted to start our church for women, the Goddess Temple of Orange County, I had to apply to the Irvine City Council for a business license. Well, they refused to give me a license to open our doors initially. And their official reason, this is the official reason given by the official city council, all men at the time, the official reason they gave me, I quote, because I'll never forget it, There is no goddess, so you cannot have a goddess church. There is no goddess, so you cannot have a goddess church. Now that is having an entire system of culture working against you and your beliefs. If I had gone to them wanting to start a Christian church, I doubt there would have been any problem. It is tiring to continually fight the primary culture in which you must live. And as time goes by, if you were a rebel, maybe now you're over your initial rebellion. Maybe you just want to go back home. Maybe you just want to go back to happy Thanksgivings and Christmases where you can join in with all the comforting traditions. You can sing all the hymns. You can be one with your family again. Not that oddball, outsider, crazy witch woman. Returning to the religion of your family can feel like psychic rest after years of standing alone for yourself in your beliefs. Especially as we age, we can get tired. And if we get seriously ill or an important death occurs, particularly of a person who did support us, it can be so tempting to just return to an entire system that takes care of you and tells you what to do, cradle to grave. Sin, redemption, salvation. Very simple, very clear, very appealing if you're exhausted. Returning to or joining a huge religion resolves that cognitive dissonance by replacing these somewhat diffuse goddess principles of immanence and body wisdom with concrete doctrines of transcendence and moral order. Adults want the freedom to study, to think, to decide for themselves, but exhausted children just want to be told what the rules are. When we're scared or we're tired, we are more like children. We want to be told not to do the work of thinking for ourselves, but just what the rules are, so we can just abide unthinkingly by those rules and never have to worry about getting chucked out into the damn snow. Under stress, and know that we are all under stress in a patriarchy, the psyche wants an external authority to tell it what to do, to take away the responsibility for a self-directed life. It takes immense strength to remain a functioning, self-determining adult in a very scary world. Goddess spirituality embraces a lot more paradox and moral relativism, you might say. What is that phrase? All acts of love and pleasure are my ritual. If you're a woman with a lot of suppressed guilt, this free-thinking spirituality can bring up a lot of internal conflict. Christianity has a clean and simple structure of confession, repentance, and forgiveness that can allow the Jungian shadow to be more easily, although much more superficially, resolved, at least for a time. Those conflicts will come back much later, but hey, you're good for now. Through the simplicity of Christianity or Islam, a woman can feel liberated from her feeling of inner chaos to a place of what feels like integration, coming home. As women age and their death looms closer, the immanent divinity of earth-based traditions can feel to some too vague or too numerous, too many choices to be satisfying. What's going to happen to me? Do I go to some kind of bardo, or maybe to the Summerland, the other world, the unseen realm? Maybe I go to Tir Nan Og, but I probably have to pronounce it correctly before they'll let me in. Maybe I go to the land of youth. That's probably where all the plastic surgeons go. Bring your wallet. Avalon, that's it, the mystical island where priestesses dwell and where souls may journey after death. Or maybe I go to hell or Helheim and rejoin my eternally fighting family. Valhalla, yes, I'm a warrior, but I'm also a woman, so I'll probably meet Freya in her domain of Folkvanger. Maybe it's the ether, the astral plane, the Elysian fields of the Romans. But I understand you've got to be virtuous to go there, and I really hate being judged. There are the Isles of the Blessed for you Greek-inspired folk, a paradise for the heroic and spiritually refined. The Shadowlands, the Cauldron of Rebirth. How many choices there are. Very confusing. Christianity and Islam have much simpler explanations for what happens at death. And there's something else. Public renunciation of your former beliefs engages what psychologists and storytellers call the redemptive arc. The heroine of this story, like Doreen Virtue, casts her former self as deceived. She was in error, not her fault. Demons deceived her. But now she is awakened. Now she is enlightened. Now she sees the real truth. And now she gets to embody coherence and moral superiority. Plus, she gets all the resounding applause of an automatic built-in community of believers who have every reason to embrace her now, as her choice confirms theirs. Doreen is now married to her fifth husband and living in Washington State. She has resolved her existential tension after making a ton of money in New Age spirituality. She said in a 2024 article, I am now making in a year what I used to make in a week when I was in the New Age. Speaking of money, there is another reason why some women who want to be famous and successful leaders, renounce goddess spirituality. They find out that there is no real fame or success or money in goddess spirituality. There's money in New Age spirituality, but not goddess. These women go in to goddess spirituality wanting to be successful in both social standing and income. They feel themselves to be leaders. I've met many of these women. And they are disappointed to find out that they get neither in goddess community. They don't get social standing with the wider world, and they don't make any money. Even if you're really smart, really beautiful, really well-spoken, even if you have all the qualities of a female Joe Dispenza or a Tony Robbins, goddess spirituality will not make you rich. In fact, most of the best teachers I know who are in their 70s and have been teaching women's or goddess spirituality for decades, most of them are struggling financially and still having to work and teach classes in their elder years. I had one woman who was a very strong supporter of our goddess temple for about 3 years. You could see she wanted to be a leader. You could see she wanted to have followers. You could see she thought well of her ability to lead. And then suddenly she told me she was returning to her previous Christian megachurch. I think it was Saddleback. She openly admitted to me that she had worked hard to be a spiritual leader in goddess community and found that she just couldn't, no matter what she did, make any money. She couldn't gather any clients. The demographic market was far too small. She said, goddess is too niche. She knew that if she returned to the Christian church, she could easily become a much more well-known teacher and leader and gain the recognition that she really desperately wanted and needed. And for a woman whose ego needs adoration, I have news for you. You will not find that in goddess spirituality. We are all very egalitarian. There's not much of that worship of a great teacher and leader that some women need. But at least this woman knew why she was doing it. At least, unlike other women, she was not lying to herself. It wasn't about her beliefs. It was about which avenue she thought would make her the most successful in society. And she did eventually become a leader in one of the biggest Christian churches in Southern California. She married a rich man, and she now lives in a $6 million home in Orange County. I believed goddess rather than Christianity was her authentic, private belief. But she sacrificed her heart wisdom on the altar of outward success. But everyone is entitled to their path. And it's not true for everyone. Women who turn from goddess spirituality to Christianity hoping to be more visible and successful as leaders may find that compared to the men, they really struggle to make it. Doreen was wildly successful in New Age community, but when she renounced all of that and went to work in Christian community, remember what she said? She makes in a year now what she used to make in New Age community in a week. It's interesting to know that the top 3 male evangelists in America are Kenneth Copeland, worth 300 million, Joel Osteen, worth 100 million, and also, who's that third guy? I can't remember his name, but he's also worth about 100 million. The top Christian female evangelist is Joyce Myers. She works very hard. What is her net worth right now? About 8 million. Men make over 10 times what women do in Christian leadership. So if you're going into Christian leadership for the money and you're female, you might want to rethink. I am not saying that all women who return to a male-dominated religion do it for any of the possible reasons I just stated. Every woman has her own reasons, her own path, and I have no idea what any woman's path should be. There are undoubtedly deep karmic reasons for a woman making this very different new choice. I don't know, perhaps her soul realizes that to do certain things that she wants to do in this lifetime, in this human realm, maybe she can best do those things in the context of Christianity, of Islam, or Buddhism. I pass no judgments. Each woman is sovereign. But I do ask a goddess woman, a woman who has long believed in the immanence of divinity, a woman who is now considering returning to a social structure of transcendent divinity, and a male one at that. Please consider spending some time going within. Journal. Discuss it with trusted friends who don't have an axe to grind either way. Come to your clear reasons why you are now making such a different new choice. Then go ahead and make your choice. It's your life. Goddess spirituality says you are sovereign. Blessed be. The Museum of Woman. The power of woman to set things right again.